Welcome to When We Talk podcast, a place where we talk about everything from relationships, marriage, being single, conflict in marriages, conflict in relationships. We talk about it all. This episode is hosted by Kenneth Bonner and Reggie Smith. Welcome again to When We Talk. This is Kenneth Bonner,
Reggie Smith,
and Jackie Wells.
Today's topic is going to focus on life after divorce. One of the things that all three of us have in common is that we have been divorced before. It was a tough decision for us that we had to make. However, we want to talk about how you recover from being in that scenario where you had to make a decision of divorce. We're not advocates for divorce, but because of the circumstances that we were in, that was the obvious choice that had to be made. So we want to kind of touch on some of the things of how do you recover from it? What do you do? What's life like after divorce? And how do you prepare yourself to date again? And so to start the show off, we're going to let Jackie go ahead and kind of touch on this topic for us.
Life after divorce. Wow. So I got married, to me at a young age. I was 26 years old when I got married. And so it wasn't, something that at the time, I didn't think that I rushed into, but I thought that it was something that I needed at that point in my life because I had already had a great job. I was in the process of getting a house built. And so in my mind, I was like, well, I have a missing piece. I need to have a husband. And so, of course, once I got into the marriage, I realized that it really wasn't the right thing for me at the time. So after divorce, I had a lot of mixed emotions. I was disappointed in myself. I felt like a failure because I had kids also, in the marriage as well. And so I was looking at it from a perspective of how is this going to affect, my kids? Bringing somebody into the home and then now having to go through the situation of him no longer being a part of their lives. So, for me, it was disappointing, but yet it was also riveting because I didn't pray for, I didn't seek godly counsel at that point on understanding, what a real man is or what a husband looks like, So for me, I honestly prayed about it, before I made the decision to leave the marriage. I really sought after God to say, okay, God, if this is the route that you want me to go, I need you to show me. And from me spending time in prayer and really seeking God about the situation, that's when I got clarity and he started revealing to me why, or, he started revealing to me that this wasn't the right relationship for me.
Well, let me say this before we go forward, because I want to drop a little nugget for those that are listening, that there are two types of marriages. There are the marriages that we put together, and then those are the marriages that God put together. All right. Let me leave that with you. We can probably bounce back on that, but I want people to kind of think about that. For my situation, I have to be honest. At 22 years of age, I had no business marrying anybody's daughter at all, period. I just didn't. Coming out of the military, my first part of the military, still active, still being who I was, it probably wasn't a wise and smart move. And even though I got wise counsel, I received a lot of wise counsel. But, when people are telling you what and what not to do, we tend to naturally be rebellious. But anyway, went on and did it anyway, and 16 years, and wound up having kids out of the whole ordeal. Now, my situation, and I had to be honest, and a lot of men will not be honest with it, is that I had to realize is that out of everything that happened in our relationship, by the time it really came time to salvage it, so much damage had already been done. And I had to do something that most men don't do, is that I had to take responsibility. 60% of my marital demise was my fault. So with that came along, after the separation and the split, came a lot of hurt, a lot of resentment, a lot of self-reflection, because for the very first time in my life, I felt like a failure. And in that whole process, I almost forgot about the most important aspect of it was my kids. And it made it hard to move on, but eventually I did, but it was not easy.
All right. So for me, and And before I get started, I want to just kind of touch back on the scripture of what Reggie was saying. It's in Matthew 19:6. It says, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. And for me, like you all, I married at a young age. I don't think that I was even mature enough to marry somebody. And because we had kids, I got somebody pregnant. I was like, okay, I need to go ahead and do what I got to do. Because I was battling, struggling between my faith and my flesh. And so I tied myself to somebody where I knew God didn't ordain the marriage, or call the marriage. And it just wasn't what I felt like marriage should be. And so went through a long period of time to where, we went through a whole lot. And for me, I just, was miserable, really miserable. And so, it took a while to get out of the situation. But one of the things I didn't want to do, I think I had a fear factor of leaving my kids behind or not being involved with my kids, or, just the whole fear factor of, if I get out of this relationships, is there going to be a roadblock to keep me from seeing my kids? Kind of like we talked in the last segment. And needless to say that got out of the relationship, struggled with some of those things, but life out of that relationship was so much better than life in it. Before I got out of it, I just kept praying like Jackie, and pretty sure Reggie did as well, and just kept, saying, God, I know marriage is not like this. I know marriage is so much better than this. I know you have a different plan. But for me now to be out of that toxic situation, I just took time to focus on God and who I was, and begin to seek my identity in Him, which is what helped me kind of bounce back to being the man that I am today.
Yeah, that's good.
So I think that the question that needs to be asked is, how do you move on once the smoke has cleared, once the papers have been signed? No matter how, if it was an easy mutual split or tumultuous split or whatever, how does one move on with their life? How do you move on? How do you navigate through now the rest of your life as an individual, as opposed to navigating your life, being with another individual, working on being two people working on being one? Now you're alone, you're by yourself. What are some of the first steps that you need to take?
So for me, I feel like the first step you need to take is to rediscovering who you are, because after you come out of a marriage or relationship, I think oftentimes people jump right into another relationship too soon, and they don't rediscover who they are again. And what we end up doing is, when we don't rediscover who we are, we carry broken pieces into the next relationship. And now that we're in this relationship, it also becomes fragmented because we didn't have those time to let ourselves heal or be restored or find out who we were again. So now we're carrying fragmented pieces into this new relationship. Therefore, this relationship is dissolving like the first one did. So I think the first step is to really, first of all, get to know who you are, fall in love with yourself again, rebuild who you are. And as you rebuild who you are and rediscover who you are and fall in love with yourself again, then you definitely need to keep God at the forefront. Keep seeking Him. Help Him, allow Him to help you rediscover your identity and who you are in Him and who you are or should be in the next relationship. Because if you don't take that first step in rebuilding yourself, then you're going to always move from the next relationship thinking that you can get into another relationship because it's going to solve the problem. It's going to fill the void. It's going to take away the loneliness. And in actuality, it does nothing but further damage you, because you can't be half of a person going into a relationship expecting that relationship to make you whole. You need to be whole going into that relationship. Granted, you won't have everything you need. You get a lot of things out of the relationships you're in, but you need to go into a relationship as a healthy person. And the only way you can do that is to rebuild yourself, fall in love with yourself again, and rediscover who you are. And I'll let one of you all go ahead and jump in on that.
Yeah, I like that. I think the identity piece of it is so important, especially when you're finding yourself moving into another relationship. So for me, I had to really question myself to say, what could I have done differently? Or I set the standard of, okay, I know exactly what I've been through, so I know what it is I don't want. I know what it is I do want. So really being able to look at yourself and kind of reflect on the situation that you were in before, to be the catalyst of saying, this is what I'm going to do differently if I choose to get into another relationship. I'm going to make sure that I take my time to really discover, like you said, who I am as a person so that I can know what my expectations is going to be for the next relationship.
Right.
I got an epiphany this morning while I was laying in the bed. And the example that I want to use is if you can envision yourself with a glass of water. The glass of water is the relationship. Add 2 ice cubes into that water, and you'll slowly start to see over a period of time where the ice cube starts to melt, and now they are now becoming one. Well, now picture yourself getting ready to go through the separation. You're divorcing, and you take that piece of ice cube out, and it's only a little bit left. That lets you know that a lot of yourself has now been engulfed into this previous relationship, meaning that you've lost a lot of yourself in that relationship. So basically, you're broken. You're on broken pieces. You know what I'm saying? A lot of who you are, a lot of who your identity is, has now been lost in the confines of this previous relationship. And where I made my mistakes is that I didn't realize that I was broken. I didn't realize that I had those issues. So now everyone that I linked up with now became the beneficiary of my pain, my hurt, my broken pieces. So my question is that how do you pick up the broken pieces, and how do you identify that you are broken? What are some of the factors that let you know? And I say with me, there were triggers, because in relationship, you develop triggers. You understand what I'm saying? Relationships are hard enough as it already is. You understand what I'm saying? Even if it's a good relationship, it's still hard because you're giving yourself so much of yourself in that relationship. But for me, I realized that I had a lot of emotional triggers, and it turned around and I hurt a lot of people in the process because I didn't know that I was broken. I didn't know that I needed healing. I just thought, okay, that was over, deal with it and keep it moving. So my question is that how do you identify that you are broken? And then once you identify that you are broken, how do you actually pick up the pieces and actually keep it moving?
Wow, that really hit home for me, because I can remember after going through the divorce, I fell into a depressed mode. I'm not going to say that I was going through depression. I was just depressed. And it got to the point to where, as my brother came into my home one day and he just kind of seen, the house wasn't together, it was kind of messed up. And he just kind of seen me in a limp mode on the couch. And he knew that something was going on with me. He knew that that I was suffering from, the effects of me going through that divorce, because I wanted, I think marriage is beautiful. I wanted to be married because I know what, a quality marriage looks like. And because mine failed, I realized that, wow, what am I going to do next? So for me, it took a lot of help from family and from friends to really get me to the place to say, no, you didn't fail. This was just a season in your life where you went through, but now it's time for you to move on and get back into being who you are as a woman.
I agree with that. And I feel too that, like Reggie said, the triggers, how do you recognize that you're damaged and broken? If you have a good group of people around you, or just a couple folks that you're really close to that have nothing but good intentions for you, you can actually see a reflection of yourself. They'll tell you, well, hey, you kind of different. For me, a lot of my family saw what I went through and how torn up I was about the relationship dissolving. And the sad part about it is that I wasn't necessarily really upset about the relationship, because the relationship needed to go away. I think for me, it was more so of the fact that, man, I really wasted my time. I put myself in this position. I put myself out there. I got kids with somebody. I married them. I thought it was going to work. And you can't force, like we were talking about, you can't take a piece to a puzzle that it doesn't fit and force it to fit. It's not going to work. And so for me, I felt like I needed to take the time away and seek God, really, to find out, where do I need healing? What areas am I broken in? I mean, what am I missing? And another pattern is if you jump in another relationship and you see the same things happening, then you have to question, is it that person or is it me? Is there a continual pattern? Because a lot of people jump from relationship to relationship. And like you said, Reggie, we damage folks because we never take the time to, again, look at ourselves and see where we're broken and see where we might be making a mistake, or to acknowledge, the issues that we have, the personal problems that we have.
Exactly. I want to say this too, that I look at it we could draw a comparison from the Bible with the children of Israel. When the children of Israel came out of Egypt, they had a very volatile relationship with Egypt. They experienced physical abuse, verbal abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse. And so what happened was, on their way out, and I want to say this as far as being careful, on their way out, they were kind of lost. Mm-hmm. And sometimes what happens is, as we are exiting that relationship, we are voided, we are lost. The children of Israel were lost and voided, even though they had witnessed everything that God had done for them. They had witnessed the move of God. But it came to a point in time to where, when the rubber met the road, that they wanted to go back to that relationship, even though that it was bad. You know what I'm saying? Because they got comfortable. My caution would be to anyone that's been through it, going through it, or about to go through it, is to be careful, because sometimes, based out of fear, we would rather go back to where we are comfortable, because even though it may have been bad, there is some type of foundation that we have that we can draw from. Also, you have to be careful, very, very careful. And you find this a lot with those who have been in a relationship for a long, extended period of time, where that person may have been all they may have known or whatever like that, then experience certain things, that you got to be careful that when you come out of this relationship, that you don't become promiscuous, okay? Mm-hmm. Wide open. You know what I'm saying? Because that's usually what happens, because it's like you're all over the place and everything else like that. And one thing that I do notice with a lot of women is that a lot of them, when they come out of their relationship, they always get a butterfly tattoo. Well, the butterfly represents freedom. Sometimes you don't want to be to a point to where you're too free, to where you once again lose what little bit that you have of yourself. So that would be my caution. That's also to me. And we don't go around getting the butterfly tattooed, but we respond in a different type of way. And that's what happened with the children of Israel. They became very promiscuous, meaning that they started getting in relationship with other gods and not being heeding white counsel and doing those things. And it made it hard for them to move on. And if you read in the scripture, I counted when I did a sermon, it was at least 150 something odd times where you kept seeing, and again, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. Mm-hmm. Because they just did not want to listen, and they wanted to be free. They didn't want to have anyone ruling or guiding over them. So my caution would be is that just to really be careful as you're trying to identify who you are and find out who you are. Also, begin to forge a relationship with the Lord, because He's the only one that can lead you and guide you through all the pitfalls that may be coming, or anything else that may be coming over the horizon as you are trying to find yourself.
Mm.
I agree with that. And I also think, too, that, like I was saying earlier, that you need to get around some good friends and some good people, mm-hmm. not just so they can inspire you and build you up, but so that they can hold you accountable. Mm-hmm. Because we tend to be in bad situations, or like a bad marriage. And like you said, once you get out, then, okay, I'm free. I can go do what I want to do now. Mm-hmm. You know, the marriage was bad, and now you think that what you've been through is the definition or the identity of marriage. Mm-hmm. And that's necessarily not true. You know, mm-hmm. It's just your experience. It's just what you went through. But that doesn't define how marriage should go, because marriage, it takes two people. Mm-hmm. But mm-hmm. after the marriage, you know, and again, we're not advocates for divorce. We understand and that this is very real, and it happens. It happens a lot in the church, too. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, I mean, if we're being honest about it, but I really feel like, you know, we have to take time to not rush again, you know, mm-hmm. and I think that's where a lot of people fail. They get divorced. They get out of a relationship, or whatever the case, and they rush back into the next relationship. If you don't take time to yourself to really discover who you are, or, you know, just your identity, like Reggie said, you could end up in a situation to where, okay, I got freedom now. That person looks attractive. Let me go ahead and lay down with them. You get what I'm saying? And now that all the treasures and that you're trying to get back in your treasure box, you're slowly giving them away every time you lay down with somebody, mm-hmm. to where that right person comes along. What treasures do you have to give?
Right.
You're empty now. You gave all your jewels, everything that's a prized possession about yourself. Mm-hmm. You gave that all away. Mm-hmm. You know, so now how do you get that back? You have to go through the cycle again of rediscovering you, you know, repurposing yourself, refinding yourself. It's just an endless cycle. So I agree. You know, don't go out there and just start giving yourself away because you're free. No, rediscover your worth, because once you rediscover your worth, you'll realize that every person you come in contact with doesn't deserve a piece of you.
Exactly.
And I think too that when you were talking about promiscuity, when you think about that, the lonely factor, you know, because now you're having to put yourself back into the position to where it's just you, or maybe you and your kids. You don't have anybody to come in the door and say, honey, I'm home, or you don't have anybody that you can cuddle with at night. So, you know, a lot of times that is a safe haven that we have of, let me get out, you know, and go to the club or go to the bar with my girls, you know, and see if there's somebody else out there, without realizing that the loneliness is the prime factor on why promiscuity exists.
Exactly.
Right.
It's that need that you talked about, that we have that need to be with. You all were talking about something about the love languages earlier, about a man's need is the love language is touch. You know, he has to have that touch or physicality.
Physical touch.
Yeah. And so I feel like, you know, that's sometimes true with women because they love affection. You get what I'm saying? And some men love affection too. But again, if we're not careful, we get out of this relationship. Now we're giving everybody affection, you know, and then people get mad when people start talking about you and looking bad on you and say, wow, you move around a lot. Well, you have to ask yourself, do I move around a lot? You know, you can't get mad if that's your lifestyle. So take your time, slow down. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I want to say this too, and is that one of the reasons why we jump into various relationships after we've come out of long relationships, after we've come out, is because if the Bible says that we were created in God's image. Well, part of who God's image and his character is that he's always desired relationship with his creation. So that's in us to always be in a relationship.
Right.
Now, and all the time, it's not always the greatest relationship. It's the best relationship. But it's something about being in a relationship or partnering up with someone that's innate in us. It comes with the territory. We just have to make sure that we are careful who we partner up with. And like you said, Kenneth, giving ourselves away to someone who is not worthy or deserving of that. My next thing would be also one thing that I did, and I should have did it longer. After I came out of my relationship and the divorce, I traveled. You understand what I'm saying? I traveled. And anytime my guys would call me, hey, Reg, where you at? I was in South Carolina. I was in Florida. I was just all over the place because I was just trying to enjoy myself. I went on this sabbatical. You know, I wasn't with anybody. I think I did it for about 9.5 months. To be honest, those are probably the best times of my life because I wasn't tied down to anyone. There was no real responsibilities. Of course, I still have my kids, but I was trying to reinvent myself, find out who I was, learn from my mistakes, you know, and that's some of the things that I did. But I didn't do it long enough. You know, I should have done it a lot longer. So that would be one of the things that I would tell someone, man, after you come out of a relationship, and we've continued to say, find who you are. Who am I? What makes me tick? Why am I the person that I am? What's my purpose? What are my goals? What are my destinies? What is the destiny that God has for me before we move into another relationship? And what Kenneth said was very important, because you don't want to, and I've done this, and I think a lot of us have done this, you don't want to bring that residue from another relationship into your current relationship. Because now it starts to mimic that, and now you spend so much time trying to recover from that, you never move forward in the current relationship that you have been destined to be in.
That's good. And I think too, not being idle, because that's another thing that where you're sitting idle and it causes you to think about that past situation and you lose sight of getting back to your new norm, you know, and being able to rediscover who you are, you know, from a woman's perspective. Who am I as a woman? You know, what is it that God has called me to do? You know, and God created woman to be a helpmate to a man, you know, so we have vital principles just as women that we can contribute to the other person. So making sure that I understand what my character is intact as a woman, making sure that I can bring all the valuables that I have within myself to be that helpmeet for that man.
I agree with that. And this is one of the things that I tell people all the time. Your feet face forward for a reason. God did not design you to walk backwards. And the reason for that is, like Reggie was talking about earlier, because that loneliness is a driving factor to a lot of decisions, we tend to walk backwards back into the relationship or the bondage or the toxicity that we just got out of. And if you're not careful and surrounding yourself with the right things and doing things like traveling or, you know, just going on a sabbatical or reinvesting in you, then you'll find yourself right back in that place. And here's the other part about it. You end up finding a relationship with somebody that looks like what you just came out of. You know, kind of what did Egypt say? What did the children of Israel say? It was better that we would have died back in Egypt.
Back in Egypt.
Because you want to go back to that comfortable place. This is why I say your feet face forward for a reason. You need to walk forward. You need to keep it moving, as Reggie always said, because if you do not, then that loneliness will be that driving factor that puts you right back in the predicament that you just got out of.
Exactly. And I want to say this too. And I think before you do anything else, the number one thing that you need to do is forgive.
Yes.
You need to forgive yourself, and you need to forgive that person. And there was a freedom. Now that was a freedom that for me was mind blowing, because I remember I was in the gym working out, and something just hit me, and I called my ex-wife, and I said, you know something, I need to apologize to you. I need to apologize for this, that, and that. We were young. We made a lot of mistakes, but it was me that did A, B, and C. So I apologize. And I can remember hearing a voice. She was like, wow, and we talked for a few minutes, and we kind of kept it moving. But after that, I felt this burden lift off of me, because I was able to, because I didn't forgive myself. I didn't forgive her. I didn't forgive the whole situation. I held on a lot of bitterness. But once I forgave her, and also forgave myself, I was able to move on. And I'll say this too, residue is very important. You could have a house that has everything you want to, but if you go down in the corner of that house and see this little piece of residue that might be mold, that piece of residue could wreck your whole entire house.
Exactly.
So you want to make sure that you don't take whatever you might think is small or big into this other relationship and eventually set up and cause some type of cancers. Forgive and move on.
And one of the things that I want to say too is, from the scripture, 1 Corinthians 7:17, it says, nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned them, just as God has called them. So I think we need to learn how to be content, whether we're married, whether we're single, because again, that's another development factor of you coming to know who it is that God has called me to be, instead of rushing into my next. Enjoy the single life, enjoy being free, and and really coming to know who I am as a person before you get into that place of it's time for me to get involved again. Be content in that situation. You never know what God is going to reveal to you as a person, just by you spending time with yourself.
Exactly. I agree with that. Because we've been saying it all along, is that you don't want to carry broken pieces into the next relationship. Getting rid of the residue. I think that's important. And, being comfortable and content in whatever situation God has you in. And I think that we have to maintain the patience. We talked about it a couple segments ago about waiting on the Lord. God will reveal to you the timing of when you should be in the next relationship. And if you have patience enough and faith enough in him, then you can trust the fact that he doesn't want you to go through the same old cycle you just got out of. Of course, he's not for divorce, but you have to remember that he didn't design every marriage. You get what I'm saying? Some of us made choices without seeking him or seeking his counsel. And so now we've put ourselves in those predicaments, but you can heal. You can recover from any situation that you're in. God is a healer. He's a deliverer, and he will get you through this, but you have to be faithful and committed to him. If you're faithful to him, then you know how going into the next relationship, you can be fully faithful and committed, but you can't do it if you don't discover you, if you don't forgive, and if you don't just be content in whatever circumstance God has you in.
And I want to add this as we get ready to close, and it's coming from Philippians 4:11. He says, not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state that I am in, therewith to be content. So no matter what your situation is, be content in who you are, be content in who God has called you to be. Be content in who God is calling you to be. And no matter what pain, hurt, sorrow, loneliness, or despair that you are experiencing, know that God is a deliverer, God is a healer. But all we have to do is just trust God in all of our ways, and God will direct your path.
Well, thank you again for tuning into this episode of the When We Talk podcast. Please like, subscribe, share. You can also visit us on our website at whenwetalk.net or on YouTube at When We Talk Podcast. Until next time, keep your head up.
Keep God first.
And keep it moving.